Hurt With You, from Suzi Quatro's 2011 album, In the Spotlight. Chris Cordani here, and so is Suzi Quatro. Suzi, you kept true to your rock roots, as some of your peers went more electronic in the 80s. Was there anyone trying to push you into that direction?
Oh my God. They could have pushed with an army behind them. I'm not an electronic person. I am very old-fashioned that way. I like to be in the studio with musicians making the music, where the bass bounces off the drums and the guitar player bounces off the horn part. And it's the only way to make music. I think they've bastardized it, And I must say, when it got electronic, it lost me for a while.
You even took a retro turn with some 60s covers in your 80s music.
Yeah, sure. But we've had a system, right since the first album, to do one or two covers on every album. We've stuck true to that right the way through.
That includes the new In the Spotlight. And just like we were discussing a few moments ago, you took a very synth-based song, Strict Machine, which we'll play a little bit later on this program, and made it a rockin' guitar tune.
Well, I was a little bit sneaky in that, too, because I put in a teeny bit of Can the Can. Because as I was putting down the vocal, and I said to Mike, am I wrong? Mike Chapman, am I wrong here? Or is this much like Can the Can? He said it is. I said, okay, let me try something. And I put a little bit in. And I said, can we do that? He said, yeah, let's do it.
It's right there in the bridge, too.
Yeah, that's what I did.
Suzi, you were a major influence to a lot of the girl bands that came along in the 70s and 80s, and even today. A lot of them still list you as an influence. Talk about some of the female-led bands of today that you think are kind of bringing in a new generation of great music.
I think I don't know if there's so many bands right now, but I think that there's a lot of odd female musicians scattered around in big bands, which never used to be, You got people like Orianthi and all that, and, I see them here and there. So, I don't know if there's a big band at the moment. I mean, the last one I can remember that was pretty big was the Bangles. And you had the Go-Go's, you had Bertha around our time, you had Fanny way back when, you've got...
there are a lot of good ones, I can tell you that.
Yeah, there's some good ones coming up. I think there seems to be a movement for females to gather force now, which is a good thing.
We see a lot more female lead guitarists these days.
You do?
Yes. Bassists.
Which is great.
And again, back in the day, it may have been a piano on occasion or singing kind of slower songs. There were your exceptions, like yourself, Janis Joplin, the Runaways. But today it's more prominent.
Well, Joplin, of course, wasn't a musician. There's always been girl singers.
Right. Always.
But Joplin broke the mold as far as being a ballsy girl singer. She has that thing all for herself. But musicians-wise, that's what was never taken seriously, not for a long time. And then, I still have to do a 20-minute bass solo every night just to show them that I actually play.
20-minute bass solo. That's going to be fun.
Well, it's not boring. I guarantee you that. I've always said to myself, if I do a bass solo, I make sure it's not boring.
Suzi, if not for your accident, you would have been in Detroit this year for the Music Awards show, performing with your sister Patty. How often do you play with your sisters these days?
Well, that's not something that ever happens. It was going to happen in Detroit just for the award show because the Pleasure Seekers and Cradle were getting something, then I was getting a solo one, so it seemed kind of fun if I could play with the original band, but that didn't happen because of my injury. Other than that, they haven't worked for a long time. I know Patty's doing a few things now, but they weren't up and running as musicians at all. I was, but they were over there, and I was over in Europe most of the time, so it wasn't something that happened.
Suzi Quatro is with me on Revenge of the 80s Radio. Suzi, you recorded a new album in 2011, In the Spotlight. Talk about it.
Well, Mike Chapman, who I've always worked with, we've never stopped, he said it was after Back to the Drive, which was my last studio album before this one, which was an autobiographical album, and I kind of got that out of my system, and then I wrote my book Unzipped, and then Mike called me, and he said, okay, now you got all this autobiographical stuff out of your system. He said, now let me do the next album. I know exactly what to do. And he did. He took me down a nice path. He said he knew the songs, he knew exactly the musicians to use, and we made the album, and it's gotten just absolutely rave reviews.
Suzi, some of the guest musicians on this album are rather interesting. I love the name of the band, The Neighborhood Bullies.
Yeah, that's funny, isn't it? But it was good, you know. It was great to be in the studio and play. That's the main thing, you know. It was a real album with real musicians, and Mike chose a lot of good songs. My tribute to Elvis is on there too, Singing with Angels, which is one of my personal favorites. It's a good album, and like I said, all through my career, I think the two albums that I got the best reviews for was Back to the Drive and In the Spotlight, my last two albums.
It's very hard rocking. It's a little bit of today's flavor, but really mostly Suzi Quatro from the 70s and 80s, kind of mixing it in. And again, not too much of the electronic stuff, but really hard rocking guitar and bass.
Yeah, I think if Suzi Quatro was starting now, this is the album she would make.
And the Jordanaires also contributed a little bit here.
Yeah, sure. That's on my tribute to Elvis. The song is called Singing with Angels, and you've got James Burton on guitar, just, you know, one of my heroes, and you've got the Jordanaires on the backing vocals. And it is my tribute to my influence from the age of 6.
Elvis Presley, one of them. I didn't even ask you that earlier. Who might be some of your other influences?
Well, he was my main one, and then I became a big fan of Otis Redding, so he taught me phrasing. I became a big fan of Canned Heat. I learned a bit of bass soloing from him. Jameson, Motown, my favorite bass player of all time. And that was kind of it. That's where I got my style from.
October 29th, you'll be staging a one-woman show called Unzipped at the London Hippodrome. What are showgoers going to see?
Well, it runs for 6 nights from October the 29th to November the 3rd, and it's called Unzipped, and it is a walk through my life. We have some clips, you have lots of pictures. I got 4 musicians on stage plus myself, but it's more unplugged. I don't want to give too much away. It is called like the autobiography, but it's you shouldn't come with a preconceived idea. It's going to be an unusual show.
Lots of surprises. You'll only find out if you go. Do you have plans to take that anywhere else?
Yes. This is a little testing thing for me. I got to see how it goes, see how I like it, and if it goes good, I'd love to take it all over the world.
Perfect. We'd love to see it here in America, I'll tell you that.
Yeah, that would be great, wouldn't it?
Yes. I'll be there. I know that.
Okay.
Are you planning to tour again in the future?
Yes, I'm touring all the time now. I'm just starting to do gigs again, finally. Did my first one August 27th. I've got another 2 coming up next week, and then I start to work. You know, then we're letting the gigs come in again because obviously I couldn't do anything with my injury.
Suzi Quatro, thank you again for being with us here on Revenge of the 80s Radio.
My pleasure.
You can catch up with Suzi on her website, SuziQuatro.com, and her Facebook fan page. You can also find her on Twitter. Suzi, let's play a single from your 2011 album, In the Spotlight, Strict Machine.